very small publisher in Secaucus, New Jersey, called Carroll Publishing, in the late 90s. I think it was like 1997, 1996. And I was supposed to be a publicity assistant, but everybody quit in the publicity department, and I became like the de facto publicist. There was no email, there was no internet. You had to pick up the phone. We used fax machines to send out press releases. And my big break came because the publisher bought North American rights to a scrapbook by this group called the Spice Girls. And they came over to the US, and I was in charge of everything. I was in charge of the publicity for their book signing, for the book. I worked with their record label. So all of that happened.
Did you hang with the Spice Girls?
I did. B. Dalton, 6th Avenue. R.I.P. It was a lot of fun. They were lovely. And from that, though, I was quoted in USA Today. Now, I was fresh out of college. That was my first job out of college. And I started getting phone calls from other publishers to talk to them about, coming to be a publicist. And I didn't really think right out of college that I wanted to work in the city right away. I, come from a very humble blue collar background, and that was just not something that was ever put in front of me. I found out about book publishing because I followed Jackie Kennedy's career, and I was like, that seems very glamorous, and I love books, and why not try to do that? So.
Wait, for people listening, because Jackie Kennedy, they think, well, she was the first lady, but she also did work in publishing.
Mm-hmm. She was an editor for Ballantine.
She was a what?
She was an editor at Ballantine Books. And
in her later life, like after the presidency, after John Kennedy had been killed, she was living in Manhattan and ended up being a books editor, which I don't know if everybody knows.
No, I don't think they do. I just happened to be obsessed with her when I was younger, in my 20s, and I thought, she was the coolest. And I had always been a book nerd, but I didn't know what to do with that. I started out as a business major, and a professor came to me and said, I think you should be an English major. And then my dad said, I think you should be an English major. And I said, okay, well, I'll be an English major, except my father's deal was, you should be an English major and go to law school. And I sort of was on that trajectory for a little while, but I got pulled into book publishing because I answered an ad in the New York Times Sunday paper for this job at Carroll Publishing that said, publicity assistant needed, must love pop culture, must have good sense of humor. And I was like, that's me. And so I did all that. And then I moved on to pocketbooks for a very short stint, maybe 8 months, where I worked on some paperbacks and some MTV books. And then I got called by the publicity director at Dutton, at Penguin. And I ended up working there for 8 years, which was the longest my record staying anywhere was at Penguin. And I left there to go to Atria Books as the VP of publicity. And the whole, the reason why I kept moving around was because I sought out opportunity wherever I could. I was not and am not, a person who sits still for years and years and years at the same place. It's just not in my DNA. But once I saw that the current VP of publicity at Atria had left, I thought to myself, wow, that's an opening for me. I just had my son. This was 19 years ago. I had just had my son, and I was kind of like, I don't, I was feeling stagnant. And everybody at, Penguin thought I was going to quit to stay home with my son. And I went into my boss and I said, I'm taking a job to be VP of publicity at Atria. And everyone was shocked because, they thought I was going to pull back on my hours or something like that. And so I was at Atria from 2006 to 2010. And then I decided to try to freelance for a little while, because my kids were little and I wanted more time at home, a little more flexibility. So I did that until 2013. Then I went to Perseus as publicity director for Weinstein Books. And then they had an opening for VP of Publicity and Marketing for Running Press in Philadelphia, and they approached me about it to see if I would, take it. And I was living in northern New Jersey at the time, and I took it and I commuted every day for a
What?
good.
Wait, what is that commute like?
It was 2 hours each way.
Oh my
And
God.
that is when I opened an account on Audible.
I was going to say.
Yeah, and discovered audio. My love of audiobooks was born out of my commute to Philly. I loved working out running press. It was just the commute was brutal, and I saw that Rodale Books, which was at the time, still outside of. They were acquired by Random House, so they're Penguin Random House, so they're now an imprint over there. But Rodale, when Maria Rodale was running it before she, sold the company, had their magazines and publishing operations all in the same place in New York City. So I saw that they were looking for an associate publisher, and I got in touch with the publisher there, and worked there for a very short time. I didn't, I was only there for 5 or 6 months. It didn't really feed me the way I thought it would. It was a good experience because it was very sales oriented, but it wasn't, I didn't find my rhythm there. It wasn't something that I was completely interested in at the time. So a friend of mine has her own literary agency. It's Andy Barsby at Empire Literary. She had been bugging me for like a couple of years. You should be an agent. You should be an agent. And then finally I told her, I think I want to try it out. So I am not a risk averse person. I decided to try it out for a couple of years. And, if you want to talk about sticker shock, I kind of knew, what advances were like at different levels, but I didn't know it so much from the agent side, how hard it was to make good money on the agent side. And I found it incredibly frustrating because I would find these projects that I thought were very viable in the marketplace, and I still do. But editors, that's when I started noticing, editors would just say no right off the bat. Not for us, not for our list, and not really give a reason why. And it was very discouraging and disheartening to me, to kind of look at the industry through that lens. And
Which I should say is maybe closer to the author's lens. You're like
it
one step
is.
closer to the author. Wait till you get down to the author's lens. It gets really depressing.
I know that now. And
Yeah.
that's why I think the agenting experience for me was really important. I think that was probably the most important job that I've had because it made me very author centered. Whereas before, you're kind of in a machine, working for a machine, and you just have to, you're juggling like 5 or 6 books at a time, plus a staff, and you just have to move on to the next. So you can't really get in the weeds with your authors that much when you're a publicity director. When you're an agent, you're in the weeds with your authors. You're helping them edit. You're working on proposals with them. You're doing a lot of different things with them, and you're very close to the project. And that's why it felt so discouraging to me to see, a $24,000 advance or a $12,000 advance or a $5,000 advance.
I was going to say 24 sounds high these days.
I know, I know. And that was a huge reality check for me. I knew like mid-range level of advances, from my time working in-house. I knew really high advances for huge books, because as a publicity director, the publisher is coming to you and saying, look, I paid 7 figures for this. This needs to work. You don't hear, hi, we paid $10,000 for this. This really needs to work. That doesn't happen. So it was shocking to me. And I know, some authors are going to listen to this and think, if you think that's shocking, and I'm here to say, I know how small advances can get. I know that some of them are $1,500 or $1,000. So it really wasn't feasible for me to remain an agent because I needed a steady income. And it was too discouraging to me to keep putting my heart into these projects and just get rejected so quickly. I mean, in my heart, I'm a publicist, so that's sort of a life of rejection within itself because you hear the word no a lot, but this was a whole different level for me. So I was kind of at a crossroads, and I decided to take a year off to work on myself, figure myself out.
Ayahuasca ceremonies, candles, a shaman.
Therapy is what it's called. And figure out if I wanted to remain in the book publishing industry. And I kept, when I was ready to kind of get back in, I kept applying for these jobs. I'd go on interviews and I would not get the job. And that was new to me as well, because I had always gone after these jobs and gotten them. And then all of a sudden I was, I sort of disappeared from the industry for 8 months. And then when I tried to get back in, it was incredibly difficult. I don't know why, there was more competition for positions, younger competition for positions,
cheaper,
much cheaper. So I ended up interviewing for a sort of ambiguous publicity position at Skyhorse. I didn't really know much about the company when I interviewed. I knew Mark Gompertz from Simon & Schuster. He was the publisher for Touchstone Fireside, and he's the group editorial director at Skyhorse. So I interviewed with him, and then I interviewed with Tony Lyons, who is the president of Skyhorse. And it was very, sort of very, very indie. And that was a new kind of exposure for me too, because Perseus was more corporate. And, it was very corporate. It was very, by the book, P&Ls, budgets, all that stuff.
P&Ls being profit and loss
Yes.
statements.
As I found out once I started working at Skyhorse, that's not the way they operate. And as I, found out about how other, indie publishers operate, I found out that they don't operate that way either. So the P&L is doesn't exist. Budgets it's kind of like, well, justify why you think that we should spend $1,000 on, something, marketing or something like that. It was very scrappy, but I did enjoy it because I got to get my hands into a lot of different areas. So I came in and I said, can my title be publicity director? That's all I wanted. And they were sure, and, I didn't, one of my first, projects there was working with Alan Dershowitz. And I was like, I didn't know very much about him. I didn't know, all this stuff was going on or anything. And so I had him, but I also had Christine Pelosi, Nancy Pelosi's daughter, who was awesome.
That's a pair.
Yeah, right. And it really, what it did for me, I'm, working at Skyhorse, so a lot of people, I think, granted, there are controversial books that they publish, but that's not all they publish. I'm not here to defend any of their decisions, but I would ask that people keep in mind that they also have a literary book in print. They also do a lot of lifestyle books. They do cookbooks, all kinds of things. Their backlist is enormous. And so what I worked on, yes, I worked on a lot of controversial books. I worked with Alan Dershowitz, Woody Allen, Michael Cohen. I did some work on Bobby Kennedy's Fauci book, but I also did a lot of work on a lot of other things there. And I feel like, working at Skyhorse gave me an opportunity to understand publishing in an even different way than I had before, because I got to be in on the every process, editorial process. Tony Lyons let me acquire a couple of books and edit them. And so working there, you get a lot of freedom. You get to do a lot of different things. You don't have to be pigeonholed and you're an editor, you're a publicist, you're this, you're that, you're in sales. You can do different things. And I think that's the beauty of indie publishing sometimes. You get to have exposure to all these different areas of the company. So back in, June 2022, I found myself at a crossroads again. I felt burnt out by the pandemic. My eldest was graduating high school. My youngest was graduating 8th grade. One going off to college, one starting high school. I was turning 50. In between all that, I decided to go back to school to get my MBA. And, I talked to the folks at Skyhorse and decided that I wanted to figure out my next step. And, we parted very amicably. And then I took a few months to figure out what I wanted to do. I focused on school. And
you got your MBA?
I am 3 classes away from getting it.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Early congratulations. Preemptive congratulations.
I'll be done in May 2024. So I decided that I really didn't want to work for a publisher in-house. I wanted to strike out on my own again, but in a smarter, more strategic way. And I also thought about Substack a lot because I started subscribing to all these newsletters on there, and I had wanted to make a go of some kind of publishing newsletter, around 2017. It was too hard though, because I was working as an agent. And so in March of this year, I thought, I'm going to give this a whirl. And I did. I came up with the name, Publishing Confidential, and I started just writing. And, I try to do things there that people aren't going to see covered in Publishers Weekly or Publishers Lunch or, by publishing reporters at the New York Times or Wall Street Journal. I try to do, analysis of different things going on in the industry or the marketplace. And, a lot of my MBA work informs what I write about there. And it just really has given me this outlet that I never thought was possible for someone like me. The response has been great. I have gained a lot of subscribers within the past few months. I'm not charging for it yet. Maybe at some point I will, but it's a labor of love. I love writing it. I make sure I do it once a week. There's never a time when I can't think of a topic to write about. And And then so I call it sort of a portfolio career because I have that. I have, I do some volunteer work for different organizations that are publishing adjacent. And I would say that I'm more of a strategist now than a publicist. I work with authors and organizations and some indie publishers on strategy and marketing. And yes, some publicity, but I have found that the publicity landscape has changed so much over the past 3 to 5 years that it can't just be, a potential client, author client coming to me and saying, I'm interested in your services because I just want to get reviews for my book. I'm not going to take that person on because it's just too hard. Review space is so tiny now. And honestly, reviews don't sell a ton of books.
Okay, I got to stop you just because I have two questions. I mean, first of all, I have a comment. Like, it seems like an intractable or like an insolvable problem, this issue of how to get exposure for a book and to get book sales. It seems like a puzzle that nobody can solve. Sometimes it happens.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if anybody knows quite why. But a related question, and I want to ask it before we get too far downstream, has to do with this choice you made to go get your MBA at age 50. Mm-hmm. And you're close to the end, and you've almost got your MBA, and the course of study that you've taken has coincided with this decision to sort of break out and go solo and become a strategist and to kind of redefine your role within the industry. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering how much of the decision-making process that went into becoming a strategist was informed by the MBA education. Like, did it help you clarify? It gave you? It did, okay.
150%, yes. What it gave me was the opportunity to study other industries and to write papers about them and to dig deep into them to figure out what made them tick. So I've spent a huge amount of time studying the streaming industry, like Peacock, Hulu, Paramount Plus, compared to the Netflixes of the world, YouTube and stuff like that. I've studied the auto industry, the airline industry for mergers and acquisitions. So as I went along in my MBA program, which I have a 4.0 in, thank you very much.
Good for you.
I realized that I had much more of a brain for business than I had originally thought. And I enjoyed it. And I enjoyed the strategy of it. I enjoyed, picking apart different pieces of different industries and digging into them. And I really got a bigger picture of what was going on in the marketplace at large for consumers than just the book industry, and how I figured out, the Substack is I've taken everything that I've learned so far about different industries and I've just plugged book publishing in there because you kind of have to do that. If you're looking at why, and we can get more into this, but if you're looking at why book sales are in a decline, you also have to look at why streaming numbers are bad right now. We're in a point of the year where there's a lot of earnings calls going on with media conglomerates. Disney had theirs yesterday and they're losing subscribers. The only streamer that really saw significant gains this quarter was Netflix. And that is because of their ad-supported tier and lower pricing. So if I'm looking at that, and I'm looking at, what's happening with the box office, Barbie reaching the $1 billion point in the US, and then I'm looking at, say, The
The Eras tour,
yeah, that
right?
definitely that. The Eras tour,
Taylor
um,
Swift, we're talking
yes.
about.
The fact that you know, Crocs and Levi's and the Olive Garden have seen double digit growth, Build-A-Bear, over the past 6 months. It informs me that consumers are spending money, but they're spending it very specifically. And it also informs me that people are, you know, there's a whole thing in economics called, you know, the consumer's willingness to pay. And so all that means is if I were pricing Taylor Swift tickets, if I'm a ticket broker and I'm going to list them on StubHub, I'm going to price them as high as possible to see if there's someone who will buy them at that price, because that tells me that there's someone out there willing to pay $10,000 a ticket. And there are. And same thing with Beyonce tickets.
Can I
So,
just say? Can I just say that's fucking crazy. I don't
right,
care. I don't care how much you love a musician or a
right.
sports team. Like paying thousands of dollars for one concert, unless it's like, you know, you've got some
There's
sort
no
of terminal.
one.
Maybe you have like some sort of illness or something. This is it. But I mean, Jesus, like that's a ridiculously overpriced ticket, in my opinion.
It is. And, you know, my husband is a music industry executive. So, you know, and we kind of like look at each other like, you know, I mean, that's insane. I mean, even he, you know, he was like, that's crazy. That's insanity. But the thing is, you know, people paid the money. She sold out stadiums. So people's willingness to pay for things is there, but it's just specific things. So, you know, if we're looking at the book publishing industry and we're looking at other things that are happening in the economy, like, you know, what's going on with streaming, like when the pandemic, you know, was full blown and everybody had to stay home, everybody wanted streaming. And that's when every media company went into the streaming wars, and got their platforms up and running. So, you know, you saw the dawn of Paramount Plus, you saw the dawn of Peacock, and other, you know, streaming platforms. And now we're in a phase where I feel people want an experience. They don't want to sit home, but at the same time, interest rates are really high. Student loan repayments are going to be due again very soon. And so there's a push and pull there. There's a, you know, maybe I have disposable income to do something fun, but I really want to do something fun. And so that income, that disposable income isn't necessarily going towards a book purchase. It's going towards Taylor Swift tickets, Barbie tickets. You know, I can buy a pair of Crocs, put on my Levi's, go eat at Olive Garden and go to a Taylor Swift concert, and I'm out, I'm having an experience, I'm, you know, all these things. I'm not just sitting home reading. I think that affects the industry. It can't not affect the industry. And so what puzzles me sometimes when publishing executives say that they can't figure out why, you know, why book sales are down. In my mind, I'm thinking the answer is right in front of you. If you just look around at,
Well, but what I'm hearing you say is that, you know, you can't live inside of your own lane
yep,
and you have to look at like the business environment holistically in order to
yes,
understand the reasons why book sales might be down right now, whereas they were up during the pandemic, right? When
yes,
people were kind of turning inward and like, I understand, like from a human nature standpoint, that makes sense to me. People during the pandemic obviously closed off from one another, freaked out. A lot of people really having a hard time being alone, turning inward, reevaluating, all the stuff that went along with this crazy pandemic. And then now we're seeing like a couple of thoughts. It seems very natural that people would want to be out and having community experiences, like going to a concert or sitting in a movie theater, these
yes.
things that we used to take for granted, where we're all kind of together. Like people are hungry for that. But when I think about Olive Garden, Crocs, Barbie, and Taylor Swift, there's also something sort of infantilizing about it. These are kiddie-based things that adults are getting into, or like, I want comfort. I want to wear my Crocs and eat unlimited breadsticks at
Yes.
Olive Garden, and then I want to go see Barbie. And it's like, listen, like no shade. People can like what they want to like, but as an adult, I see this over and over again. There's something childish about our culture where like adults are like, I want to be a kid again, and I don't. I'm like,
No,
what
I
is
don't
going
either. But I can tell you this. The world is pretty terrible, if you read the
Right.
news.
That's right.
So if I'm given the opportunity to escape that for a couple of hours at a Barbie movie, wearing my
Right.
Crocs and my Levi's and
Yeah.
my belly full with unlimited breadsticks, I'm taking it.
Yeah.
And then, the terribleness of the world can resume after I leave the movie theater. But why not dress up all in pink and go have your experience, at the movie theater? So, and, I could hear a publishing person now saying to me, well, if that were true, more people would go to author events. That is not true, because that is not an experience. That is you sitting and listening to an author read from their book.
Listen, I know this is gonna cause people to get mad at me, but I have said for years. I know some people love it. I cannot stand readings. They
Either.
are boring, and for the most part, sometimes people can really read well. I don't know. I have a hard time following along unless the book is in front of me. Reading for me is something I'm doing alone. It's a
Yes.
solitary endeavor, and I don't. Again, it's sort of kind of childlike. People want to be read to, maybe, but it just, they bring me anxiety. Like when because I've done them, you feel like you sort of have to, and then
Yep.
you're like, oh shit, is anybody going to show up? And you have to sort of hassle people to come out to listen to you read. I feel awful about it because I'm like, this is boring listening to me read. Just get the
Right.
book if you want to. Read it if you want to.
Right.
But some
And
people like it. Some people like it.
a lot of people do like it, but not
Yeah.
enough people to usually make it worth, your average author to go on tour, because it's wildly disappointing. And, I'm of the age that I remember sitting outside B. Dalton in the mall at a folding table and with folding chairs with an author just sitting there, and
Ugh.
people would just walk by. And it's an awful experience, not only for the author, but for the publicist sitting next to the author. And so I feel like unless there's an experience involved in it. So and I had never gone to a book signing before I started working in publishing, and I had to do it for work. And the only book event that I ever attended outside of work was within the past year. I went to Matthew Perry's book event in New York City, and I wanted to see what he was like, on stage. I was a huge Friends fan. And it was great because he was engaging and charming, and
He's an
had all these.
entertainer. He's an actor.
Exactly. And that's why,
Right.
that's why stuff like that does well. It's just like, Jason Bateman, Will Arnett, and Sean Hayes, the actors, they have a podcast called Smartless, and they took it on the road and they sold out everywhere because the three of them together, they're funny and engaging. And HBO Max made a, docuseries about this, based on the tour they went on, and it was hilarious. So people want to be entertained, and I love you authors, but a lot of you aren't entertaining enough for people to really, get a babysitter, pay for gas in the car, maybe pay for a meal out. There are so many different things that have to go into getting a person to a book signing. They really, really have to want to go.
Yeah.
Whereas,
And by the way, like let's just say, it's not the job of an author to be an entertainer in
it's
that like a performing entertainer.
it's
Like
not,
maybe, but I say that, and now every author I feel like is making these cell phone videos where they're talking to the camera and putting it up on Instagram, and it's like some of them can do it. I don't want to make hard fast rules, but I feel like this can't be the way. like authors are supposed to be entertaining on the page and to create these like unbelievable reading experiences. To also have to be a tap dancer and like a stand-up comedian and to go out and to be like a masterful orator and also a great publicist and a social media phenomenon. It's like, it's too much. It's
But
too much.
that's the problem with what's going on today. We live in an attention economy. And to get someone's attention is very difficult because there are a million other things that they could look at.
Right.
You know, I could scroll through TikTok, and I did this the other night actually, because I couldn't commit to like an hour long show. So I scrolled through TikTok and I watched all these clips of The Wolf of Wall Street. I have never sat down to watch the whole movie. And it was almost like I watched the whole movie in short clips on TikTok. So that fed into my attention span at that moment. And I think that's also a huge factor in all this. You know, in trying to get people's attention, they want TikTok especially has made it so that people want to laugh. People want to be entertained for like 2 minutes in a
Yeah,
video. And it's nuts, but that is where we're at.
I
You
know.
know,
It depresses me. It depresses me to no end. And I got to say, it's not that I'm totally above, like I've scrolled through TikTok. TikTok turns your brain to mush.
sure it
It has
does.
a narcotic effect. I see why it's popular. It's very easy to just sit there and start flipping.
Yep.
And they're very good algorithmically at getting you engaged. Like it's like, oh wow, a shark attack. Oh wow, like a cute girl doing yoga. Oh wow, a car accident. Oh wow, it's like these things were like, and I didn't ask for this stuff. They must somehow know me. I don't know. Like I'm like, oh my god. But it's
Yeah, your every move. That's the thing.
yeah, and it's like
They
so it's
know
like
they
oh
trust
Jesus, they upset you though. Why are I mean what is it about me where animal attacks are being fed to me over
That
and
is
over again?
strange. That's strange, Brad.
Yeah, people dancing, people that feeds me people dancing. I'm not a dancer, but
I
anyway,
get stuff that's like I get, and I'm almost embarrassed to say it, but I get a lot of Kardashian clips and I'll sit there and watch them mindlessly. I hardly see anything from Book Talk on there. I see lots of, funny things about parenthood or animal, dogs. And so it knows that maybe I'm not going to engage with Book Talk, but that I'll stop and watch a minute of Khloe Kardashian talk.
or like or some like heartrending video about a dog that was found like
Oh gosh, yeah.
in a in a hole and it was almost dead and then they revive it. They know how to pull the heartstrings. It's the
They
content is
do.
emotionally, it destabilizes you emotionally one way or the other.
It's there to manipulate you
Yeah.
and into looking for more of that content, whether you do it consciously or not. And I think that's important for authors to remember because, part of what I talk to authors about is book talk. And I wouldn't, I'm not here to discourage anyone from making a TikTok. I personally, I make TikToks of my puppy and put it to funny music. That's what I'm good at. That's my lane on TikTok. I can't do, personality, funny, video or anything like that. And I don't think a lot of authors want to or can either. So book talk is really about the influencers on there. And that happens organically mostly. A lot of them don't want necessarily, to get paid by a publisher, or, want to be pitched. They like to discover these things, discover books on their own. And then you see, I'm getting to the point where I'm very cynical about it now. I think a lot of it's staged. The more, I have scrolled through the hashtag book talk, and the more I look at it, I'm like, you can be crying over, every single book you've read.
Oh my God.
So,
See, this is what I'm saying. It's this artificialness. Like
yeah.
I feel that too. And I won't let my kids on social media, any social media, but especially TikTok. And my daughter's like, Dad, I'm the only one. And I'm like, good. Like, I don't care. I'm like the grumpy dad. I will not allow engagement with this crap. I think it's not good for people. That's what I think. And I say that I have a TikTok for the podcast because I feel as a business matter, I sort of have to,
Sure.
but it doesn't do much. I'm not
Yeah.
seeing much result from it. I just put up clips of these exchanges. I'm not doing the talking head. I'm not trying to be an influencer. Maybe I should, but I just can't bring myself to do it. It's just, that's not me.
No, and I think, the thing, and I've written about this in my Substack, the thing that authors need to remember is that it's not you, it's the algorithm. And TikTok is going to favor big influencers on there with who get a ton of views because it's not so much about how many people are following you on TikTok. It's more about how many views your videos get. I mean, sure, for influencers who are approached by, beauty brands or fashion brands or the music industry or what have you, they have over 1 million followers. The bar is very high on there as far as influencer deals with brands. So when you're talking about something like TikTok, it's really about the views that a particular video gets. And that could be, and most of the time it is, a one-off. It got 1 million views. That doesn't mean that every video that person does is going to get 1 million views. It just happens that that one, probably showed up in, the algorithm a lot, got viewed a lot, and kept showing up more the more it got viewed. And then that's it. And so the next video that the person does may only get, 500 views. So it's, the thing that I try to focus publishing people on is social media means that you're renting your audience and you don't own them. So you have to think about what you're risking by investing so much into something like Book Talk. Because look at what happened to Twitter /
Yeah.
X.
Yeah.
You
I mean,
know,
all these people, we are all working for these companies unpaid to create content that they monetize.
yep.
This is my beef with it forever and ever. And it makes me feel like such a mark, We're all doing
Absolutely.
this. And I feel bad for the people who have built up these huge Twitter followings. And now Elon has essentially tanked the whole thing and made it this awful nightmare place. And it's like, well, how good are those 700K followers you have now? They're sort of useless.
They're sort of useless. And, I've been on Twitter for 15 years. That's a lot of time to be on a platform, and I invested a lot in it. And I'm not, I'm not mad about it. I'm still on there. I think as hard as other platforms try to kill it, it's not going to go away. And people are still going to be on there because it's extremely difficult to duplicate what Twitter has done. Threads, fine, for a week it was, wow, look at this new thing. It's boring. You look at something like Blue Sky, it's invitation only. I'm on there. Somebody gave me a code. I would say it's very niche. I tried Post, boring. Twitter is kind of like it's the devil that's the best way I could put it. It's the familiar.
It's where people are. People just
It's
want to
where
be
people
where people are trying to get famous. They just want to be where everyone else is there in this kind of like futile hope that they're going to go viral and become a hit. That's it.
Yeah. Sort of,
Yeah.
And I feel like, I sort of feel like book publishing hasn't quite caught up to that yet. As a whole, my questions would be, are agents and editors still assessing social media platforms for authors the same way, when they decide to take on a client or acquire a book? Is that the same conversation as it was a year ago? It shouldn't be.
Yeah.
It
Well, I
should
mean,
be
this
a
is
completely
one of
different conversation.
yeah, we should say. I mean, we're talking kind of holistically, but we need to like hone in on or home in on. Is it hone or home? I never know. But we need to zero in on the the publishing business. And what we're talking about here is one aspect of why you say in your Substack essay, which is sort of the point of genesis for this conversation, that the business is broken. And it's one aspect of it, where publishers are often evaluating authors and prospective projects based on the author's quote unquote platform. And so if you are one of these rare authors that has a big social media following, this is a feather in your cap, or at least it has been.
Yep.
And what you're saying is that even if this person does have a big social media following, it's essentially worthless, or it might be, because social media audiences are so fractalized and the algorithms are so unpredictable, increasingly so.
Yes.
So the value equation isn't there in an easy to quantify way.
No. And again, I can't emphasize enough, you don't own your audience on social media. You do own your audience on Substack, though, because you have all the email addresses and you can export them into an Excel sheet. And you know who every subscriber is because you get, you have a list there that you could look at. You know what the analytics are of your newsletter, the open rate, how many times it's been viewed, how many people it's going to. And so it's a great platform to try things on, to test material. I can see which one of my Substacks performs really well versus one that performs average. And I adjust based on that. People really liked the, book publishing is broken Substack that I wrote a couple weeks ago. That was my biggest one so far.
Because people agree, people feel it. People feel like something isn't working.
Yes.
And let's go through. I want to go through this post that you put up. And we've touched on some of the stuff that you talk about within it, but I think where it begins is with the recent layoffs at Penguin Random House. So nothing is a more overt sign that not all is well with a business than mass layoffs.
Right.
And so for people who don't have any frame of reference or who don't pay attention to the business side of publishing all that well, can you just give a little bit of context for the layoffs, like why they happened or why they, were said to have happened?
They were said to have happened because, the narrative really is that Penguin Random House lost the case against the Department of Justice when they tried to acquire Simon & Schuster.
Which was just acquired by a private equity firm.
Yes. And because of that, the trial and the fact that, Penguin Random House now had to pay Paramount, which is Simon & Schuster's parent company, $200 million in a kill fee. Marcus Dole exited, Madeline McIntosh exited.
Who are these people? These are executives at Penguin Random House?
Yeah, well, Marcus, I can't remember exactly. He was the CEO of Bertelsmann, I want to say. I think so. Madeline was the CEO of Penguin Random House US. And so, I'm sure that they shouldered a lot of the blame, for what happened with the merger falling apart. And there's a new CEO at Penguin Random House. I cannot recall his name at this moment. So of course he has walking orders, from Bertelsmann.
Bertelsmann is the parent company.
Yes,
it's this huge like conglomerate. What do you call it? A holding company? I don't even know what you call these things.
I would call it a holding company, pretty much.
Okay.
So he's looking at inefficiencies. He's looking at, we have a hole in our budget and our balance sheet now corporately, because that's where all this stuff lives. They took a $200 million loss, in a kill fee. So as much as we like to think that, they're rolling in money over there, they're really not. And
what is a kill fee? The kill fee is...
Kill fee is when you go through mergers and acquisitions, if it's high risk, and this was from the very start, they will structure a deal, they meaning the bankers that are assisting the corporations who are putting the deals together. The entity that's selling, in this case it was Paramount, built in that if this deal gets killed, you need to pay us $200 million. And Penguin Random House was that confident. And I wrote a little bit about it today in today's Substack. What should have happened was, at the time that Paramount, it put Simon and Schuster up for sale. It was November 2020. That was an election year. If it was Trump's DOJ, this deal would have gone through. I'm 100% sure of it. He would have let it happen. But it wasn't exactly a secret that if Biden got elected, that his Department of Justice wasn't going to, let's make all these mergers and acquisitions happen and make, some industries less competitive. That's not his deal. He's more.
And just for people listening, just to clarify, like, if Paramount sells Simon and Schuster to Penguin Random House, I mean, it used to just be Random House, and then it was Penguin, and then Penguin and Random House combined, and so you're basically, it's like a monopoly, is what the Biden Justice Department was trying to prevent, and you were saying that the Trump Justice Department would have let the monopoly grow. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And, just to clarify for listeners, a monopoly means that, Penguin Random House has the largest market share in the book publishing industry, meaning they occupy the biggest space in sales, in retail, in the amount of, backlists they have, which means, like sort of legacy publishing, things that have been published already that sell really well perennially. That's what backlist is, basically. So they occupied this huge space in the industry, and here comes, Simon and Schuster and Paramount, and they, in my mind, Penguin Random House got greedy and didn't really think through the fact that if Trump doesn't win this election, which I don't know how they could think that he would have, but the Biden administration is going to be really difficult. And that's exactly what happened. So
no wonder heads rolled. I mean,
yes,
they made they got greedy and they made bad decisions.
Yes. So what's happening, with the layoffs there, what happened is, they, a lot of attention was paid to Knopf, and Knopf is, historically a very, literary imprint.
Prestigious. It's like the prestige literary imprint among Big Five publishers.
Yes, and it was led by Sonny Maeda for a very long time, and he passed away, I think, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago. I could be off on that. And so when you're working for one of the Big Five, and your publisher has this cachet, this track record, this prestige, they're going to let you do your thing, and they're not going to examine your staff or, put a fine-tooth comb over your sales and your acquisitions. When Sonny was gone, the fine-tooth comb came out. And when the merger fell through, it was even more of a spotlight on Knopf. And so they laid off a couple of, historically significant editors. But here's the thing, and I don't mean to be crass, and I did write this in that Substack. If you are an editor who has spent your entire lifetime working at one publishing house, and, say you did have all these huge acquisitions 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and they backlist really well, which means, they still sell. You don't need to be in the building for that to happen. That's a sales department thing. And so if I'm a new CEO and I'm looking at all these salaries and I see, there are people who have been there forever, but they're not bringing in new acquisitions that will contribute to the bottom line currently, I'm saying that's an inefficiency and I'm letting you go with a package.
Plus, yeah, because those salaries, they get bigger over time. These people have these bloated salaries that they can't justify, and but then there's the human part of it where it's like they've given their life to this company, they've made this company millions of dollars, but there's just no sentimentality when it comes to the new CEO with walking orders who's reporting to Bertelsmann. That's a brutal equation.
and now you know why I moved around a lot.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to be the person that stayed in one place for 20 years and gave all that time and my brain to one place just to be like cut off.
Yeah.
And that's something that my dad really instilled in me. He worked for the railroad, but he always told me, never get too attached to a company where you put your whole life into it, because it's your life. You need to experience different things. And I really took that to heart. But I understand, a lot of people in publishing don't move around. They stay in the same place for a very long time.
If they have a good gig.
Right. I respect it. I do believe that they're, in respecting our elders in publishing. And I think that though we are in a completely different phase of the book publishing industry right now. So unfortunately, those layoffs needed to happen. I don't blame them for, having them happen. I think, yes, it's upsetting to people in the industry, but at the same time, you have to look at it as a business. It's a business. And if there's a way to cost cut, that's going to happen. Especially when sales are soft, and they are right now. And the Publishers Weekly just said today that adult fiction sales this year compared to last year are down 11.4% this year. That's scary to me.
So it's not getting better with these changes.
No.
And it seems broken to me. Because
yes.
I think this is like the driver of this show and everything that I've done. Like aside from writing books, like all this podcast stuff, the editorial stuff I did with the Nervous Breakdown through the years has all been an attempt to try to, in some small way, help authors find more readers and to help nudge books a little bit closer to the center of the cultural conversation. It is maddening to me that it is so difficult to make $1 as an author. And I see over and over again incredible works of art, amazing books that if they do well might sell 10,000 copies.
That's a lot.
That's days. A ton these days. But
I don't think people realize that.
No, no. I mean, 10,000 is that's very unusual, and
even unusual to print 10,000 copies of a book to distribute for sale.
Something's broken
Things are
though.
So low.
Yeah, and it's like, but something's maybe broken with the business. Maybe something's broken with people, or maybe I'm just like a fossil, and people just don't give a fuck in large enough numbers about things like literary fiction to sustain the business. There's just not enough.
No, I mean, you have to look at it in reverse a little bit, because, what I see in the industry is a lot of people, complaining, a lot of people calling publishers out on things. How about the retailers? Look at B&N, and kudos to
Barnes & Noble.
Yeah, Barnes & Noble. Kudos to their CEO, James Daunt, for his communications team, getting him featured all the time about the same exact thing, which is that when he took over, he completely changed that business. And so Barnes and Noble corporate offices used to have fantastic buyers in categories like, literary fiction, women's fiction, categories in all categories in nonfiction. He completely busted that up, got rid of all of those buyers. And now the way he structured the business is that store managers in Barnes and Noble are the ones who decide what gets stocked in the stores where they are. And that
So
and
it's a local decision, each individual
local
store?
decision. It's a local slash corporate decision. And what happened also at the same time is James Daunt, their CEO, Barnes and Noble CEO, decided that he wasn't going to offer co-op to publishers. And I'll explain that. Co-op is, so before James Daunt took over Barnes and Noble, every piece of real estate you saw in Barnes and Noble cost a publisher money to put a book there. If you walked into Barnes and Noble and saw books on a front table,
Right.
it was called front of store placement. And that would cost, thousands of dollars. And that's how Barnes and Noble was making their money. But it started not to work anymore, because a little bit of it was, publishers pulling back. Some of it was, they would take publishers' money, say, $25,000 to have all of this placement, and then the book wouldn't sell, and then they'd have returns. And then James Daunt comes in and says, oh no, we're not going to do it this way. He takes away that program from publishers, reverses how the buying goes for the stores, gives that power to the store managers and their staff. So it's a hyper local decision made with, corporate offices involved. And the result has been, in my experience, that they completely skip buying most titles, a lot of titles, unless they're known quantities. And that's disappointing to a lot of authors. It's hard because I think the psychology of, an author and publishing a book is to see the physical book in a physical bookstore. I'm here to tell you that, almost 80% of sales come from Amazon. Whether you like it or not, that's where people are shopping because it's on their phone, it's in their app. They could get it in a day. They don't have to go anywhere. So as much as we can sit here and say, this is terrible what Barnes and Noble did, it wasn't such a bad business decision.
I was going to say, I want to say I read something not too long ago about how Barnes & Noble has rebounded.
Yes, they have, because James Daunt has reduced returns, to, I think, under 18%, like well under that, maybe 3%, 5%. That's amazing.
Returns meaning the Barnes & Noble returning books to the publisher, which, but P.S., is the craziest aspect of the publishing business. Like, what business, you send your product to retailers, they buy your product to sell in their stores. What business allows, if the products don't sell within a period of time, the retailer to then send the product back? Mm-hmm. Why is publishing like that? What a dumb thing to do. Like, let the book sit.
That started, but it is really astounding. It just is like, what? What? But at the same time, if you're a frugal publisher, you're not overprinting your titles. So by overprinting, I mean the process is that the sales department, when they have to go, it's called a sell-in, and that means that they're going to pitch the publisher's list to their accounts. So Amazon, Barnes and Noble still needs to know, corporate still needs to know what the publishers are doing, the indie bookstores, things like that. And they'll come back to the publisher and say, this is how many copies of a particular title that Amazon is taking versus, oh, Barnes and Noble is going to skip this until they see it selling somewhere else. It happens all the time. And then the publisher has to make a decision. Okay, well, I only have 1,800 orders for this book. What are you going to do? Print 20,000? I don't think so. You're printing 3,000 because that gives you a cushion if you need to restock without having to reprint. Saves you money in the long run. But it's a huge disappointment to authors. And to that I say, and to editors and to agents. And to that I say, well, until it's proven that the book is selling, there's no guarantee that it'll sell anyway. So you have to, it's sort of like, small printings are almost like test marketing in my mind, a little bit. And that's one way in which I think the industry is broken too, because there's no, there is no test marketing really. It's your test market is actually publishing a book and seeing if people buy it. That's a very flawed system.
Maybe the publishers should do what like the movie studios have done for years, where they have the test screenings and they get actual market feedback before they make decisions about print run and distribution and marketing. Something. But good luck getting, you'd have to pay people quite a lot to actually read a book and test it out. It's much easier to get people to go sit in a movie and watch Barbie.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really something. And, what I wrote in the Substack that you have in front of you is that publishers need to figure out who the audience is, what is going on with consumers writ large, all across the board in all sectors.
How do you do that? How do you find out?
You look at what's going on in different industries. It's not that hard. There's like a gazillion, resources out there. It's, okay, fine. I'm getting my MBA, so I'm more aware, and I read the Financial Times. I subscribe to like Vogue Business and Modern Retailer and stuff like that. But why aren't publishers doing that? You have to think outside of your industry and not be so siloed and understand what is going on in retail at large, what is going on in the movie industry at large. Today I thought about how somebody should write a piece about movie tie-in books that are being published now through the rest of the fall, because any of those movies that are coming out, and I don't know what's on the docket, and as far as movie tie-in books, and movie tie-in books are basically books that were optioned for film or TV that have actually gotten made, and they're being released into the world, either in a theater or streaming platform. And the publisher then takes, they get the movie art and they slap it on top of a, paperback.
So for example, like Killers of the Flower Moon, the Martin Scorsese adaptation of the David Grann book, is going to be a big, huge movie in the fall, like a prestige movie.
Yep.
And that will sell lots of copies of David Grann's books.
But guess what?
What?
If this SAG-AFTRA strike is still happening, and that is the, Actors Guild on strike with the Writers Guild, none of those actors are allowed to promote that film.
Right.
So my question is then, how are publishers dealing with that? Because if I'm a publisher and I know I have movie tie-ins coming out and there's nobody out there promoting films, they're not allowed to do it. And say, marketing budgets have pulled back, except for Barbie, that was like sky is the limit. How are people finding out that it's a movie tie-in? How are people, finding out that Leonardo DiCaprio's in this film, other than already knowing about it, which I do. So that's another thing. Who's doing that? Is somebody writing about it? Is somebody covering it? What are publishers doing? I'm interested to know. I think that is a great topic. So there are all these different things going on that do affect publishing that are not publishing specific, but they're entertainment industry. And whether we like it or not, book publishing is a for-profit business, and you need capital, you need revenue. Capital is what you need to start a business. It's money, whether it's from investors or somewhere else, a small business loan. And revenue is easy. That's your profit, what you make. And there's not enough that goes into understanding what is happening in different areas of the entertainment industry and applying them to book publishing. That's my read on it. And so I cannot understand why any executives right now would go, I wonder why sales are down so much. Look around, and also if you're doing the cookie cutter marketing plans, publicity plans, you're not doing it right. You have to strategize better. And, I don't blame the publicist, because I know what it's like to be saddled with so many books you have to take care of and so many authors. You don't have time to do all that. So why, my question in that Substack was, why is publishing still doing it the same old way when everything has changed?
Okay, that's the key question. Here's a theory, or like one theory that among many probably, but I feel like there is a kind of lethargy born of comfort. You could speak to this better. Maybe I'm totally wrong, but it just seems like when I think of like New York publishing and media jobs, those industries are often peopled by people who are privileged and who might not have as much incentive to hustle hard enough to think outside the box and reinvent the business and respond to the change. Like it's easier to just be comfortable and to like work 4 days a week in the summer and go to the Hamptons on the weekends and do all the things that I keep seeing publishing people do. I'm like, how is this happening?
I know.
Authors are broke, and like I think there's a class of people.
Authors are broke and everybody's in Italy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
In Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah, I'm out at the vineyard. I'm sorry, I'll be back. This is my auto response to email. I'm on vacation again for the next 10 days. It's like,
yeah.
The point is that like there is money in this business, and there are certain people that have it, but it's usually not the authors and the publicists.
not any junior staff.
Right.
And I want to point that out, that junior staff, and by junior I mean you're not in an executive position. They're so smart and they're so in tune with so many things. Trust them, listen to them, pay them more, and I think you're correct. There's a certain level of publishing executive that is very privileged and is, and let's face it, white, and has gone through the industry, in thinking in a more traditional way that, we need to preserve. That's the big thing. We need to preserve publishing. What is it getting you? It's getting you what? A decrease in sales? There's no rule book that says things have to be the same. And I give the staff at HarperCollins huge credit for going on strike during those months to get what they needed from HarperCollins, because if you're a junior staff member, your voice isn't heard as much. I understand that. I know it really well. I did not come from a privileged background, and I have made it a point to be a voice in the room that questions things, because I'm not going to lie, I do have an advantage. I have an advantage because of my skin color, because of, of the ability to move around a little bit, and make a certain income. I know what both levels are like. I know what it's like to make the most money you've ever made in publishing, and I know what it's like to make nothing in publishing. And when I started out in the business, I kept my waitressing job. Whereas, the other people I was working with at that time in the late 90s, they were all trust fund babies. Their parents were paying for their apartments and everything in the city. I lived home until I was 27. Um, and so I think that there's a level of snootiness, in book publishing that is about preserving the industry. Preserving to me means you want your cushy job still.
Right.
You want things to be the same because if it changes, that means you may not be in that position. But I'm here to say that's a good thing. You know, blow it up, start over, do things differently because if you don't, it's just going to keep sinking and sinking and sinking. If you're down, if adult fiction sales are down 11.4% from last year, that's trouble. That's big trouble to me. And that should be a wake-up call to publishers, and it should, inform them better about their front list, meaning their current list, that maybe not publishing everything under the sun, is a good idea. And
Well,
I
you bring
understand.
this up. You bring this up in the article or in the Substack, essay. Is that, and I've had this thought. I think a lot of us have had this thought. There's too many fucking books published.
Absolutely.
Like, and because they're like, it's great. I know there are lots of great books. Trust me, and I know there are lots of people who want to see their work in print. But if the publisher is just churning these things out, not spending anything to market these books, except for the rare few, then what good is it for anybody? Like, there's too many books for people to read.
Yep.
There's no money to support the publication in a meaningful way in the marketplace, so nobody ever even knows the book exists.
Nope.
It's just pointless. So it's like maybe you should go for quality over quantity and just really dig in and support the books that you truly like love to a maximal degree.
Yes. And I think that there's a lot of merit to that because I have seen it over and over again. An editor brings in a book and only the editor is really interested in that book. And so, the publicity department sitting there kind of like looking at each other, who's going to buy this book? I don't know. Who's the audience? I don't know. Do you know? No, nope. And we were never wrong. We're always right. But it's a problem. It's a problem of being too insular and not looking at the consumer holistically, as also not just a reader. See, that's the other problem. You can't just market to people who are readers. You have to market to all consumers because you don't know if what will strike them. If they think something is in line with the other things that they purchase in their life, they might take a chance on your book. And that's the other thing. Like, there are a few things going on at once. I also think that if you're going to take a chance on new fiction and an unknown author, why not put it out in paperback as an original and price it lower than expecting somebody to shell out $28.99 for a hardcover? There's no reward in having unsold hardcovers. There's no reward in that, and it hurts the author's sales track record. So why not make a real go of it then and put something out as a trade paperback original?
Which does sometimes happen, but not often.
Not nearly enough as it should. And again, is about that idea of preserving the industry, preserving the way they do things. And when it's not working, it's not working. It's not. And I've been very vocal about how publishers shouldn't acquire books that they don't have any marketing money for. Just don't do it. You're not doing anybody any favors because the author's track record for sales will suffer. And so if they try to sell the next project to a different publisher, that publisher is bringing up their sales track record, looking at
It's determinative. It's
yeah,
determinative, and it dooms people.
and it follows you your entire writing career.
Ugh.
That's the other thing to remember. And I'm sorry, authors listening, but it's the truth and you need to hear it, And so my other, my other point in that Substack was, and previously I've written about it too, the onus can't just be on the author. You can't bring in an author and be like, you have to be your own publicist. You have to be
Right.
your own marketer. You have to do this. You have to do that. You're barely paying them a living wage.
You're not paying them a living wage. You're not
No,
paying them a living wage. They can't eat.
right. They
And then,
can't eat. They can't hire someone to help them. They can't, so stop it. And it's a cycle that needs to be broken. And
yes,
I'm just dying to know who's going to break it.
yeah, me too. Me
You know?
too. I want to break it at this point. I'm all
Me
fired up.
too.
Yeah. So you're saying one of the things I think you said, as we're talking about solving or, renewing the publishing industry and the kind of making it new and better, you talk about how publishing might have a branding problem.
Yes.
Like, what do you mean by that? Because this seems like it might be part of the solution.
I mean that aside from Penguin Classics, I really don't think any consumer knows what publisher published the book they have in their hand, if they have one in their hand. And so I think it's problematic in some ways because, there's no identity with the publishing imprints. There's no, this is a Atria book or this is a, Scribner book, or this is a Random House book. People don't, there's no connection there. And everything else in the world is branded, and so the brand of shoes you're buying. You may not necessarily know the studio that's putting out a movie, but if you ask people today if they know what A24 is, they'll tell you yes. And that's an independent film studio that's been very successful over the past couple of years.
They're a very,
It's,
speaking of holistic business models,
yes,
that would be worthwhile for publishers to look at. A24,
10%, yes.
yeah, they've carved out this niche. And I think the reason I think so many people like them, but they're particularly useful for somebody like you or like me, is that they are kind of a corollary for literary fiction and nonfiction
They are.
in
They
cinema.
are what Miramax was in the 90s.
That's right. That's right.
And it's instantly recognizable, for all the horrible things Harvey Weinstein did. Miramax was huge in the 90s. They had a formula, it worked. A24 kind of took that and made it modern. And they're doing extremely well because of it. So they don't have a branding problem because they have their niche. They're great at marketing. They get audiences in to see their films and they win awards. So when we talk about publishing, it doesn't necessarily have to be like, oh, this is a Simon and Schuster book, but maybe a better education for consumers to understand what different imprints or divisions of your publishing company there are and what they're known for. So when I worked at Rodale was a brand, it still is. People knew that health, fitness, thought leadership, stuff like that. They knew what a Rodale book was. I don't even know what a Scribner book is necessarily right now.
I couldn't tell you either.
I know what a Knopf book is, but that's because, and you do too, because we were in the industry, we know. But the average consumer isn't educated on that. So I think that it would behoove, the big five to look at some of their imprints and think about how they could brand it and what that would mean for the authors who are being published in that imprint. Wouldn't it help them? It would. I think it would.
And to maybe spend some money and some time educating the public, like you say, that would require some marketing investment. Like, I think you bring up in the piece, like Super Bowl ads. I know it's not going to happen where Knopf is going to be running a Super Bowl ad, but what was the business vertical that you were comparing it to?
The beer.
Oh, right.
Because and that is something I took straight from MBA world. I always wondered about those Super Bowl ads. And then, I took an economics class and in my MBA program. And so the beer brands, they advertise within the Super Bowl, not because they're looking for you to go out and buy Budweiser right away or Miller Lite or whatever. They do it for industry awareness. And yes, it's a big spend, but it also plants something up here with consumers. So they know that Budweiser is Anheuser-Busch, and they know, they know the different brands of beer, and there's a little entertainment in there too because there's Super Bowl ads. But the advertising that goes on around the Super Bowl is really not about product as much as it is about industry awareness for whatever, or whoever advertises during the Super Bowl. And I think that, especially right now with so many book bans happening and book challenges, I cannot emphasize this enough. The publishing industry needs to band together to, number one, in some ways they are fighting back against book bans, but also be public about it and, do public service, the good old public service campaigns, awareness. This is what we publish. You can shift people that way. And I don't know if anybody's thinking about it in that way. So by shift, I mean, if you're branding your imprints and you're highlighting all the different things you publish and maybe how great these books are, I'm not saying you'll defeat a group like, Moms for Liberty, but you're sure reaching consumers.
That's what I was going to say. Like the fight is worth having not only because it's the right thing to do and they are on the right side of history I can't believe we're even talking about book bans in 2023. But on top of that, it's a sticky story that will get media coverage and will bring attention to the industry. So it's like a big, huge missed opportunity that the industry could be taking the lead on and elevating itself through.
Yep.
And on top of it, they're also correct, so it's like, it's a win-win-win, but no,
Absolutely. And, it's great that, some publishers have entered, lawsuits, have come together with, organizations and school districts, but it's not happening enough. And it's not enough just to have your name on a lawsuit. I'm sorry, it's not. I respect it. But at the same time, look at it from a consumer point of view. If people don't bother to read the books and they're challenging them, get an awareness campaign going for the entire industry, and highlight all the different things. Don't be so scared of it. And that's what I think, happens in publishing a lot. It gets to be very fear-based. Oh no, we can't upset anybody. Upset people, but they're already doing something to hurt your business. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
They're already doing something to hurt your business, hurt your authors, hurt some of the, internal stakeholders, which means, employees, who, may come from different backgrounds, may identify as different genders. So the best way to support your customers and your employees and the industry as a whole is an awareness campaign, I think. I don't understand why it's not happening.
Well, you and me both. Before I let you go, I want to ask, because we've been talking a lot about kind of the big five publishers, like traditional publishing has been the crux of the conversation, and it's the crux of the piece on Substack. But I want to ask you about how you would advise indie presses, because they are playing an increasingly vital role, I think, in the publishing ecosystem. I think many of them are being formed in response to a lot of the things we've been talking about, the failures of traditional publishing to take chances on work and authors who don't have maybe a great sales track record. Like, there's definitely a market need for indie presses, but indie presses, of course, don't have nearly the financial resources that the big corporate, publishers owned by these holding companies have.
Right.
So like how should they be responding? Strategically, what's the best play for somebody who's operating on a shoestring and publishing 5 books a year or whatever? Like,
Oh,
do you know what I'm saying?
I absolutely know what you're saying because I talk to some of those people sometimes. And, the first thing I would say is don't think you can't afford someone like me. That's my plug for myself. But, I strategize with people, and you don't, people assume that I must be, I don't know. I don't know what they think I charge. I mean, that's nice, but I'm a very reasonable person, and I understand indie publishing really well. And I think indie publishing is vital to the ecosystem of the industry, and they have a lot of freedom because they're not beholden to a big conglomerate that owns them. So what I would say to them is you already know the parts of your list that fit certain niches with consumers, whether it be, you know, organic farming, or, something about painting a house, or, hobbies, things like that. The books that you acquire to be outside of that, really, you have, you know you may not have a ton of financial resources, but what you do have is the ability to be very nimble, and you can experiment a little bit, and with different formats, different ways to do publishing deals with authors. There's no rule that says, never do a profit share with an author, which means that you are going, instead of an advance, you're foregoing an advance, and what you sell is what you make. So you're not getting a royalty per se, but you're getting 50% of the profits from.
That seems like the way to do it, for because indie presses don't have money to be handing out like big advances, and like
No.
even like a $2,000 advance can squeeze an indie press. So it's
Yeah.
like, you know what? Let's not do this. Let's be business partners.
That's a really popular thing to do, and I first was exposed to that at Perseus, because if they really wanted a project, say at Weinstein Books when I was there, because that's where it would happen more, with, they would look at it as, can we do a profit share instead of this huge advance? And there were instances where it really paid off well. A lot of mid and small publishers are able to do that because they're not owned by a huge conglomerate. There's not a lot of red tape. There's not, it's very straightforward. It's a business deal with the person who owns the publishing company, and it's a partnership. And while, your run of the mill author may not be able to, quit their day job and live off of whatever happens in a joint venture, so to speak, with a publisher to publish their book, at least you know they've got it as much at stake as the publisher. And I like that idea because it really, it gives everybody a little bit of an ownership, over the book. And it's an incentive in some ways, for an author to really want to like get out there and sell the book. But at the same time, for the publishers, it's a way to say, okay, we're not going to rush in and buy, all these projects or everything that comes to us. There needs to be a market for this. Or if there's not an obvious market, where can I find the consumer that would be interested in this? And also, if it's something that you might have an inkling that could take off, why not do, instead of paying all this money out, why not just do, a profit share with an author and see where that takes you? Because that can be something that's more lucrative for both sides than just straightforward, traditional publishing. There are a lot of different models that people can experiment with in indie publishing, and that, I think, is the beauty of indie publishing, really.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's it. I mean, I think if you're doing indie publishing and you're not experimenting, you're probably doing it wrong.
Yep.
Like you just have to try stuff and become kind of a laboratory and like, take some swings and see what works and what doesn't. It's still the issue of trying to find readers, trying to find those customers. Social media, as we've discussed, is super unpredictable and kind of, I don't know, it's just an endless frustration for 99% of people who use it. Like for the 1%, it's like everything in society. Like the 1% of people who have like some sort of blessed algorithm situation, like maybe it's useful to them, but everybody else is just fighting for scraps. So there's always going to be that challenge. I don't know what the solution is. I don't know if anybody really does. If somebody did, they'd be a bajillionaire, but
I mean, one of the big solutions is something you and I just talked about: publish less books,
yeah,
be smarter, publish smarter, not
more.
more. It makes no sense to me. It never did. Never did.
Okay. Well, on that note, it's been great to talk with you. This is like an illuminating conversation. Maybe not always like the happiest news, but maybe it's the medicine we need to take and the information we need to consider, because I think so many of us feel like things could be better. And there surely, I know a million authors out there who are like, it's such a weird conundrum. They're driven to do this work. I'm one of them. You can't turn it off. And yet it's, for the most part, hopeless. It feels that way. Like
Well, I would say you and I are optimists because we're still here.
That's
and
right.
We're fighting for it. So let's end on a positive note.
Yeah. Okay. Step back off the ledge, everybody. Step back off the ledge.
Everybody to bourbon.
Yes. Come back in. Come back into the circle of trust. We're optimists. It is important work. And I'm with you. I'm still here. I'm still doing it because I think I deep down believe in the project of literature as an essential act and as the kind of, what do you call it, like artistic slow food that people really need. It's the like that slow food content that we need in an age of TikTok and just like liquefying your brain to try to numb yourself out to the pains of the world.
Oh my God. I wanted to end positive.
I can't. I can't. I'm sorry. I'm the Prince of Darkness. But anyway, there's a lot to consider, and I think there are always going to be people who take up the fight, and that's a good thing. And I look forward to hopefully seeing people find new models that sort of break things up and make it new and better. Yep. So kudos to you for thinking about it and for writing about it. And I'm glad we had a chance to talk.
Me too. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.